Dear brothers, happy Monday. Good morning. For those of you watching on YouTube, you will notice that I have some sweet Blenders sunglasses on. I am still in recovery mode from a little eye surgery I had last week, and my very, very bloody eye is not very exciting to look at. So for the next few episodes, you might catch me in some different shades. So I'll drop a link for these below because maybe that'll be cool. But we're going to talk about something that hung kind of heavy on my heart last week as I was talking to some buddies of mine about the next generation of men. And so I want you to imagine for a moment that you are a 15-year-old kid again, maybe a freshman, sophomore in high school, struggling with all the weird stuff that teenagers go through, trying to impress the ladies, to working out what's better on a first date, from theater popcorn or Sour Patch Kids. Or maybe you went crazy and you got both. Figuring out what the cool styles were, like the crazy Air Force Ones in high school, for me anyways. Trying to make the football team or the band, working on not feeling awkward around all these new people and friends and upperclassmen and adjusting to the weirdness of high school. Feeling like maybe you're the low man on the totem pole. Maybe you're struggling with some feelings of loneliness, like you don't fit in. Could be that you're dealing with your parents that recently separated or divorced. Maybe in some cases you have everything in the world at home, but maybe life feels a little bit fake. You might be trying to fit in by doing what the cool kids are doing. Drugs, sex, beers for the first time, you name it. We all had stuff we really struggled with or that we were just going through when we were kids. Some of us had incredible dads, brothers, uncles, grandfathers, mentors, coaches, people who helped us through that awkward transition towards manhood. Good men who gave us lessons that allowed us to succeed. But many of us, or many of you guys, had the opposite. Little to no good male role models in their lives. Men who quite simply sucked, weren't available to them emotionally, and even physically just weren't around. No feedback or appreciation or even criticism. Whether fully or partially absent, they weren't around. And there's also the possibility that you had that combination. Men who had some great virtues, but they also had deep vices. They were great at spending time with you, but they suffered privations in other areas of their life. Booze, drugs, women, how they treated your mother. The list can go on. But my first call to action for all of you today is this. As all of us think about the men in our lives, they all fall into kind of one of those three categories, or a combination of them. And we can all make a long list of what you had or didn't have as a young man. And I would ask all of you to make that list. Write down the good and the bad, or what was lacking for you as a young man, things you wish you had. It can be a hard list for a lot of us to look at. I know it was hard for me, and I had a pretty good upbringing. But it becomes critical to what I want to talk about now. There are few more important gifts that can be given to the next generation of men than the passing down of wisdom. And wisdom is earned through successes, failures, difficulties, personal experiences, and tragedies. Most wisdom, though, is brought about through our facing of adversities, be it externally created or created by ourselves internally. And something you hear out of the mouths of a lot of men today, my age, 30s, maybe into their 40s and certainly above, is how broken the youngins are of today. How our youth are a bunch of ungrateful, lethargic, rotten, uneducated boys. And we blame the government and the school system. Fun fact, they're basically the same thing. Or whatever else we can lay the blame on to justify this generation of soft men. But let me ask all of you a question that I've had to ask myself. If you weren't taught some of the foundational elements of being a man, where would you be today? If you were never taught respect, how would you act? If you were never taught to protect women, how would you act? If you were never taught the importance of commitment to a woman or commitment in a friendship, how would you act? If you were never taught how your word is your bond, how would you act? How about if you were never taught the necessity of hard work? What would you do? How would you act? If you were never taught the importance of seeing both sides of an argument and critically thinking about difficult questions, how would you act? If you were never taught how to control your emotions or understand your emotions, how would you act? How about a far more important one? What if you were never taught about good and evil? What would you do? How would you act? If you were never taught how to be a good man, how would you act? You would be exactly like all of the young men that we have today who are struggling. They all learned how to be who they are because the generation above them has failed in passing on the most important gift that they can be given, and that is how to be a good man. It can be so easy for us to place the blame at the feet of teenagers, but that blame needs to be redirected to the mirrors in our home. There was a time, not all too long ago, but longer ago than all of us were alive, where boys were always surrounded by good men. Their fathers, their uncles, their grandfathers, older brothers, they worked with them. They watched how they acted with their mothers. They watched how they interacted with other women. They watched how they led in the community or treated the community. They saw them go through struggles and triumphs intimately. Before this age of technology came to be, boys spent ample hours and days and months and years of time with the men in their lives. But even with all of our amazing phones and technology and cars and planes and this and that, our young men today spend so much less time with men, never mind with good men. Today's world is far more broken than it used to be. Men aren't in households anymore. Just for fun, go look up the data on single mother households from today or for today versus in the 60s, and bring a barf bag with you because you're going to get a little sick. Men are not raising their children. They're not being leaders. They're not being good husbands. They're not hard workers. This is obviously not all men, but the percentage of men that are doing these things has risen at an alarming rate. Because of this, millions of young men, millions of boys are trying to find some kind of structure, but they have no compass, they have no guide, and young people without a map of meaning become dangerous men who cannot control themselves, which, in my opinion, is probably one of the scariest aspects of our society today. These are the kind of men who can have multiple kids with multiple women and bear no responsibility. The kind of men who can go shoot up a school full of kids. The kind of men who can cheat on their wife for years and just shove it all under the rug. The kind of men who can steal without remorse from their neighbors. The kind of men who are so lost and so without meaning in their lives that they believe the best option is to take their own life. Guys, this cannot continue. There must be a breaking of this wheel, and we are going to have to be the ones to do it. So, how? How are we going to accomplish this? The external opportunities to us are massive. Go be a coach for a little league or a local peewee football or a high school football assistant or basketball or any sport. Go mentor a kid who lives on your block. Volunteer at the YMCA. Get involved in a church outreach group. Always say hello to a group of young men that you pass. Help out with the Boy Scouts. The list is endless. Just look up things that you can do in your community. But the most important thing that we must be doing is this. We have to act like the men we would have wanted or men we were lucky enough to have in our lives when we were younger. Being men of character, telling the truth, being servant leaders, working hard, persevering, showing piety, respecting women, protecting women, ensuring our bodies are taken care of, keeping our homes in order, acting like the men that we're called to be. My godfather has always told me to learn from the good and the bad that he and my father have done. Try to emulate all the positive aspects of their lives that worked for the betterment of the world, and try not to make the same mistakes that they harmed themselves with and others with. In doing so, my life will then be able to reach a higher plane than theirs ever did. And that is all we could ever want for our children and for the next generation of men, is to be able to have a better life and be on a higher level than we were ever able to. We must adopt this mindset today. Even if we're just talking about our own kids, make sure you are being the man you wish you had around when you were a kid. Maybe you had a great dad or a great male role models, but there were times where their flaws came to the surface. Flaws that not only hurt them, but hurt others deeply. I want to make sure I am not that kind of man, but a better one. One that learns from his mistakes so that my kids or other young men I mentor can have a different experience. So they don't have to live with that awful regret of hurting others. Suffering may be inevitable, like we've talked about a lot. But unnecessary suffering should be avoided at all costs, especially when it happens to those around us. We are called to be servant leaders, guys. We cannot do this behind our cubicle or behind a computer or even on a podcast like I am on right now. I am included in this call to action. We must get out into the community and serve. We must serve at home. Give our kids a better life than ours. Not necessarily a life bereft of difficulty, but a life of meaning, of purpose. Struggles are going to find all of our kids and all of the young men that we know. But when those struggles do find them, the teachings that we are going to help provide them are going to allow them to succeed in the end. You are able to give them a roadmap and a guide that allows them to handle the difficulties and sufferings that are going to exist in the world. That is the pay it forward mentality that we must embrace. The duty that all of us bear to raise strong, good, moral men who can bring those teachings to the next generation and the next generation long after all of us have returned to the dust. God bless all of you. Be strong, and let's be the kind of men that this next generation needs.